Hello, everyone. This is James Shore, and you're watching Let's Code Test-Driven JavaScript. You're watching the lab, which is where we explore, experiment, and just generally mess about. And today in the lab, we're going to look at Testem Scripts, a cross-browser testing tool. Now, if you've watched the live channel, you know that I really like Karma, another cross-browser testing tool, and we use it for all kinds of things. In fact, I have it set up right now. You can see here that I've got Karma set up to run on IE9, IE8, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, and iOS, and I can run all of those with a single command. The repository I have right here is specific to this particular lab episode, but it's based on the Automatopia repository from Lessons Learned number 8. So I really like Karma, but I've also heard great things about Testem Scripts. So in this episode of the lab, what I'd like to do is test it out. How good is Testem Scripts? Does it really work for the kinds of things that we do in the screencast? And if you've been watching the screencast, you know that I have, well, I have some peculiar needs, some desires from my tools that aren't typical. I don't want a tool that's going to automatically do everything for me. What I want is a tool that will fit into my automated workflow. So that's the criteria I have for Testem Scripts. What we're going to look at is multiple issues. First, we're going to look at whether or not Testem Scripts is build friendly. In other words, can we easily run it from an automated build like we run Karma? Does it run fast? So as we're doing our test-driven development, do we have a really fast turnaround? Is it replaceable? If we use Testem Scripts, are we going to be locked in? Or can we replace it with something like Karma or another tool in the future? Can we use it with any test framework? Can we use it with Mocha or Jasmine or what have you? Is it easy to debug? Not just with some sort of browser debugging tool, but also just using simple console.log or dump statements like we sometimes see with Karma. And does it support CommonJS? We use CommonJS quite a bit in the screencast. We actually ended up having to write our own support for CommonJS for Karma. Is there anything like that for Testem? And then finally, what's the output like? What I want to see from my tools is that when they succeed, they say pretty much nothing. And then when they fail, they give us lots and lots of useful information. So does it have useful failure output, but relatively noiseless success output? Those are the things we're going to look at with Testem today. Thanks for joining me, and welcome to the lab. All right, if you're looking at using Testem Scripts yourself, you're going to want to go to the GitHub, and installing it should be pretty straightforward. We just do it with npm. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. As usual, the tool says that you should install it with -g, and also as usual, I prefer to run things locally so that as other people get the repository, they can use the software without any trouble whatsoever. So we are installing this locally. And there we go. And now I should be able to run it by saying node modules .bin/testem. All right, and there we are. We have a nice big screen here. It gives us the URL. Let's go ahead and load this up in our browsers. I've got Karma running on all of these, so let's go ahead and change that over. I'm going to go ahead and just kill most of these browsers for now, and we'll just start with Firefox. All right, here's Firefox. Look, there we go, Testem Scripts. And here we are. We have something. It's it brought up our Firefox tab just like that, and it is complaining that require is not defined in jakefile.js. So it looks like it's tried to load up our Jakefile as one of the tested scripts. Unsurprisingly, it just automatically started up and started trying to run everything, which is really nice and convenient actually. But it's looking at the wrong files. First impressions though, I like the UI. It's really nice compared to Karma's sort of spamming you. If you look here, you can see the spam that you get coming out of Karma. And to make matters worse, Karma has this bug in it where if your window is shorter than the output it's giving you, it doesn't overwrite itself properly, so it's even worse. Really good first impression here. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can figure out how to get it to run the right files. Okay, so let's see what kind of options we have here. files to use. It looks like we want a config file. Now, one of the things that's really nice about Karma is that there's a Karma init command you can run when you first install it, which will walk you through creating the config file. It doesn't look like Testem does that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create that config file myself. Okay, here's the instructions on the config file. Looks pretty straightforward. I should be able to just basically do this. Believe that will work. And there it goes. Our tests have passed. That was really easy. I mean, there's always a little bit of config stuff, but I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so there's our basic test with Testem. I really like this interface. I wonder what will happen when we make it fail. Let's go into our example tests. Our example tests are really, really drop dead simple. We have a validate text field function that takes the text field and checks to make sure if it has a value. If it has a value, it takes away the example required class, and if it doesn't, it adds the example required class. The way this works is that when you run it, if you press the validate button, it's pink. If you don't, and if it has something in it, it's not pink. It's a really, really simple example that's good for, well, demonstrating client-side tests, and that's why I chose this. So what we can do is we can modify our production code to, well, let's just have it do nothing. When we go back here, we can rerun our test by pressing enter. And actually, it looks like it ran that automatically. Let me move these over here. So yeah, if I change this, wow, it's definitely detecting it right away. So that's nice. It's got a built-in watch. I don't use that much in the screencast, but simply because we don't have the screen real estate for it. But if you're doing regular development, it's often very nice to have your test run automatically when you save. So this is really good. I think that, I mean, so far my impressions are really good for the basic case when you want to do nothing but run your tests. But of course, in the show, we're doing a lot more than that. We're doing linting, we're doing all kinds of stuff. And this sort of automatic only run the tests actually isn't good enough in that environment because it's not going to run lint for us or do anything else. We actually want our automated build to be king. So we're going to take a look at that. But before we do that, let's just see what happens when we bring in more browsers. So we've got Firefox. Oh, and look at that. That's interesting. I didn't notice that before. It gives us a nice display of what's going on our tests. That's cool. So if yeah, that's really nice. It's got a great interface here. This is much, much more attractive than Karma. I really like that. Okay, let's get this going in Safari and see what happens. Of course, that fails in Safari. And now look at that. We've got a Safari tab. And we can switch back and forth using the arrow keys. Wow. Love the attention to the UI in this. It's really good. Chrome, I imagine that will probably work as well. So far, so good. Here's Chrome popped up. Let's go ahead and bring up Safari on the iOS device. And again, no problem. Now for the torture tests. It's time for IE8 and IE9. Let's see how those work out. Well, so far so good on IE9. It's got good, it's really smart about the browser user agents as well. I love that parsing. All right. Really good stuff. I'm liking this. Okay, how about IE8? It's as far back as I want to go. Yeah, it's not quite as pretty, but it does work. One thing I really, really like about this is, let me just bring up Karma for a moment. Okay, so I've got Karma up and running now. Right now we've got this set up with an error. So when I run the tests, notice how terrible this test output is. It's all intermixed together. All the different browsers sort of come out. Although Karma is a cross-browser test runner, the UI is really, really bad when you've got a failing test. It's not so bad when everything passes, provided the window's long enough. then it just shows you successes. But if it fails, you've really got to struggle to find the most helpful error message. And often, just because the way I tend to start up my browsers, I often get IE8 or IE9 as the ones that give me the last output, and they give me terrible stack traces. So Karma's output is definitely not helpful. Now let's compare that to Testem. Over here in Testem, it's really pretty. We can see each browser has its own output on its own tab. We got a really nice display. We can choose the browser that gives us the best results at any given time and just stick there and still see if the other browsers are working. I really, really like it. So for example, let's say we choose something that isn't supported by IE8. So we say add event listener, we're listening for a click on our field, and then we're going to do something. Well, that doesn't work in IE8. IE8 doesn't support add event listener. And so we can see that right away. It's really clean. It's really, really nice. So yeah, okay, first impressions of Testem, great interface, really strong interface. I do like it a lot. Now, what about the other things in our criteria though? At this point, I think the easiest thing to check next would be its debugging. So let's look at two things. Let's look at how well it handles console logs, and also let's also look at how well it can handle running the debugger directly in a browser. Okay, first off, let's just do console log. It's going to be pretty easy. We will just dump out here field.value. And again, Testem shows that it has a great UI. It gives us the dump output right here, refreshes it every time. That's fantastic. Okay, but what about running it in the browser? Let's say I've got Chrome. Now, if you've been watching the live channel, you know that I actually don't spend a whole lot of time in the debugger. I find that having really good tests and makes it so that a few dump or log statements can pretty much help me resolve any issue. But I do occasionally need to go in the debugger. And when that happens, Karma makes that really easy. You can press this debug link here, gives you a simple version of the page that you can then load up in whatever browser debugger you want to use. That is really nice. I wonder if there's anything similar for Testem. If I bring up the debugger here, looks pretty straightforward. Let's say we want to debug the test that checks that it applies the required field class when the field is empty. Just put the debug statement right here. And what? How do we make this go? Do we refresh? Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Now let's just go ahead and dive into that. You can see it log. It'll check to see if the field has a value, and then it will set the attribute. And then we'll come back out and do our expect. And that is that. Pretty straightforward. Yeah. And look at that. When the test takes a long time, we get a little badge saying the test is taking too long. That is nice. This is really, really a great tool. I do like it. And it looks like we also have the ability to go in and just run individual tests, or looks like we can grep for a subset. That is slick. And it shows us the text of the test. Wow. You know, the UI on this just blows Karma's out of the water. It puts it to shame. I'm really impressed. And in fact, the debugging in Testem is simpler than Karma's. In Karma, you really have to go into this debug window. In Testem, you can just do it. And of course, you have the ability to easily narrow in on any test. So if we wanted to just test, if we wanted to put a breakpoint in our production code and then only run one test, it'd be really easy to do as well. Good on them. Okay, well, debug is excellent. And better than Karma, in fact, because the way it handles those log statements. So we know that Testem works great as a standalone tool that basically owns the world. The next question I have is whether or not it works well as part of a build script, because I want to run my build script pretty much all the time. I want to see my smoke tests run. I want to have my linter run. I want to have Browserify go. I want to have everything working together. And I don't want Testem to be in charge of that. A lot of these tools want to be in charge of everything. Grunt wants to be in charge of everything. Testem wants to be in charge of everything. But I want my build script to actually decide what and when fires off. And as an interactive tool, I am wondering if this will work well from a build script. So let's go ahead and check into that. Our next challenge is to make this work as part of a build. So here we are in our build script. Right here in test client, we have this little line that says Karma run tests. That turns around and runs this chunk of code right here, which is actually not too bad. So let's see if we can figure out how to replace this with some sort of Testem approach. Okay, it looks like the way Testem is designed to run programmatically is in what they call continuous integration mode. That's run by doing Testem space CI. Let's see. I think it's going to try to launch all of our browsers though. And of course, we've already got them launched. We don't want to launch them again. That's incredibly slow. So let's see what happens there. Yeah, it ran all of the browsers. And of course, it didn't run them all properly. It just it started Chrome, Firefox, and Safari, but it couldn't find my iOS simulator. It couldn't find IE8, IE9. So that is no good. We need a way to run it programmatically. All right, well, I'm going to keep digging into this. The command line interface has got to do something, so maybe we can just sort of tuck into that. Okay, looking at this, I did find this preprocessors option, which basically allows us to run any test we want or any command we want before the tests start. And the main thing we want here is we want the ability to run our lint stuff. So let me go ahead and try that. So what we're going to do is we're going to run Jake lint before all of our tests. Okay, that appears to be working. What happens if I introduce a bug? So I've taken out a semicolon. That should cause lint to fail. Oh, and it does. Look at that. That error box doesn't support the up and down commands that the rest of the system does, though. So I'm not able to scroll up and down to see all the output. So this is a way of getting lint to work with Testem, but I have to say it's not great. It's okay. So there's a workaround, if nothing else. But let's see if we can get this to work properly. All right, after digging through this, I'm not seeing any way to run it programmatically. It does have an internal API that I'm going to try to poke into, but definitely not build script friendly. It really, in terms of build scripts, it just wants to run in CI mode. There is a Grunt plugin for it, but and it's a little bit hard to decipher. It doesn't appear to be using anything particularly convenient, but yeah, it's certainly, there may be some sort of scriptability for Testem, but if there is, the documentation is non-existent as far as I can tell, or at least not clearly linked anywhere that I can find. However, I think I might be able to sort of dig into this and somehow emulate or tie in directly to Testem, sort of like we had to do with Karma to make it do what we want to do. What I want to have happen is when the tests pass, I want it to just say okay and move on. And when the tests fail, I want it to give us that lovely interactive interface that it has. So let's see if we can get that to work. Oh boy. All right. Well, I've dug into this and dug into it, and you know what? I do not see a way of scripting this. Short of using the CI mode, which is not great, because we really lose all the benefits of the interactivity. But it's just not designed to be something that you can run and then automatically quit if all the tests pass, because I don't see any events that give us what we need. Yeah, so I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and revert back to CI mode. It's fine, I guess, but I'm disappointed because what I love about Testum is the beautiful UI, and we're just not going to get that. I guess we'll still have it in the browsers themselves, but still, I'm disappointed. All right, there we go. I think I've got this set up. Let's see if we still need that process exit here. So I should be able to run Jake. It'll run our tests, and it gives some pretty ugly output, and then it hangs. All right, yeah, so, I went through a lot of work, at least an hour or two of digging into the internals of Testum and trying to get it to be scriptable. And it's just not meant for scripting. I love the idea, but you can't. There's no way to have it run in that beautiful interactive mode and automatically exit if all the tests pass. At least not that I could see, and I worked pretty hard at it. You can run it in CI mode, but you get this really terrible test output that spams you. I believe there's a way to change it, but at this point, I don't really feel like digging into it anymore. And also, it hangs when it exits. It leaves something on the event loop or something that causes it to hang. So, verdict is that Testum is completely unscriptable. It's just not suitable for scripting, which means that it's not suitable for our use. And that's really too bad. So my recommendation is if you happen to know anybody who's working with the Testum project, my recommendation is that they add a scriptable mode, which is to automatically exit if everything passes, but to show that lovely interactive mode when things fail, and to otherwise connect to all your existing browsers. And of course, fix whatever bug is causing it to not exit when you use the API. All right, so there's that. If I sound disappointed, it's because I am, because I really, really like the interface of Testum. It's so much better than Karma, and I was hoping we could use it. But as it stands, it's not going to be usable. The last thing we have here is CommonJS. Now, I'm going to let the scriptable mode go and just use it in interactive mode. That is what it's designed for. It's really good in interactive mode. So I'm going to go ahead and look into that and see how well it works with CommonJS. All right, it doesn't look like Testum Scripts has any out-of-the-box support for CommonJS. It does allow you to run preprocessors like Browserify, though. The big question for me is how it deals with the stack traces. When we were using Browserify in the live channel, we had significant problems with when the test failed. When we had an exception thrown in our test, we got a bad stack trace if we were using Browserify. And that's because Karma didn't translate the source maps. So we ended up writing this whole plugin for Karma that would allow you to use CommonJS. And it was also turned out to be faster to do things that way in terms of runtime, test runtime. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly try to get this Browserify preprocessor running with Testum and then see what kind of stack traces we get out of it to see if it's really useful to use CommonJS. Now, Browserify will put a source map in your output file. Hopefully, Testum will interpret that. Karma didn't, though, so I guess we're about to find out. All right, I'm going to enable the debug option, which should create source maps. Now, the big question here is whether or not Testum will interpret those source maps properly to give us good stack traces. The source map is not interpreted, and that was the big thing I wanted to know. So does Testum have good support for CommonJS? No. It does allow you to do a preprocessor, which is important because it doesn't have the ability to work with a build script, but it won't interpret those source maps, and it doesn't have anything like Karma's CommonJS bridge, which admittedly we created right here on the show, but it exists now. It's actually available on NPM so that you can run CommonJS or use something that uses Browserify or CommonJS modules and actually have good stack traces. There's nothing that I see that's equivalent for Testum, unfortunately. It's too bad because Testum is really, really nice. It's got the basics right, but it's not. I don't think it's a sophisticated enough solution for our needs yet. I would probably use it in a project where I didn't have plan to have a lot of build automation, but in JavaScript where I really want the linting and we're going to want, every significant JavaScript project ends up with some pre-processing and linting and so forth. And for that, you really want a decent build script. You don't want to hack it all together uh, like Testum requires you to do. You don't want Testum to own the world. You want to just be able to run Testum as part of your script, and it doesn't do that. Bottom line for Testum, the user interface is fantastic. It is far better than Karma, and I wish it was as good as Karma in other ways because that UI is really good. It's nice and fast. It seems to be pretty replaceable. It is test framework agnostic. It has great debug support. It has great success and failure output. It is not friendly to the build though, and that is a killer. I simply cannot use it if it doesn't have good support for build automation and the CommonJS support that isn't there yet. I think that could potentially be added just as we added it for Karma, but honestly, I'm not going to take that effort because I needed to work in my build script and I was not able to figure out how to make that work well. Again, you can run Testum in CI mode, but what I need to be able to do is I want to get that great interactive output when I'm doing test-driven development that works with a build script where I'm not doing it unattended. Also, CI mode doesn't allow you to attach browsers and leave them running, or at least I don't see how to do that. There's no documentation about how to do it that I could see, which means that CI mode doesn't work with iOS Simulator. It doesn't work with IE8 and IE9 in a VM as we're running here. So bottom line, Testum is great UI. It has some growing to do. I really hope that the creators of Testum will keep working on it because I like it better than Karma, except for that scriptability part and for CommonJS support. And that is it for today's lab. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time.